There's a man in the woods. This oral motif, and it does seem to be purely oral. There doesn't appear to be any kind of written equivalent that I've encountered so far, is uniquely linked to the folktales that came out of pre-modern European and Scandinavian countries, based off of the interviews that I've had so far. I should feel lucky. Most researchers never get such a clear rendition of their focus research, let alone such a clear selection of stories. I don't understand why I feel so terrible. So far, I've noticed a few interesting trends to this man in the woods figure. First, there appears to be some kind of ritualistic element to the recitation of this figure's identity, sort of like a Rumpelstiltskin deal, where identity is power. Right now, it's, kind of unclear whether or not it's a warding ritual or a summoning ritual. You can see a parallel between, for example, the Germanic knock, where you would say knock, knock, knock 3 times to ward against the knock. I'll have to do further analysis of the narrative elements in the interviews that I've had so far, compare it to other existing folklore records, see if I can come up with more things. In terms of the storytelling structure, the 2 accounts that I've had so far are, pretty consistent. The first, what still gets me is the thing that both of these stories both started off with, there's a man in the woods. It's like a part of the story structure. It's, the telling is actually linked in the structure. But anyway, first off, the man in the woods appears near a town, and he presents as this strange, almost hallucinatory figure, and he presents at first only to children, and the adults, choose to disregard and disbelieve the children because they're children, they must have been imagining things like that. But the telling of this story by the children is interesting to begin with, because geographically this is considered, when these people were first settling, this would have been considered the middle colonies. This wasn't New England, the area wasn't rife with tellings of Satan and witchcraft and things like that. This was not New England. This did not have the kind of faint aroma of witch burning. So, after the children see this man and they tell their parents, the second thing of note that happens is that the children start getting sick. And this, this puts the community on edge because, again, these children are the future of the town. There's a lot riding on, the survival of these children. And with that kind of strain on the town, the man in the woods starts appearing to more people, more credible people in the town. And he appears to be getting closer. Then, children start disappearing. And with this, the community starts sort of ripping itself apart from the inside out. Different relations start fraying, things like that. And finally, there doesn't appear to be any kind of resolution to these stories. Usually, with the end of the story, the town is left in some kind of, you know, emotional and sometimes physical shambles after these, townspeople have gone on various hunts for this man in the woods. They never find him, they never find anything. It's entirely possible that these stories might have actually been based on different child disappearances over the years. And it would account for the higher than usual amount of trauma that's marked in these stories, as well as the lack of resolution. There doesn't appear to be any resolution in these stories, and no clear moral to them either, other than this kind of generic warning of this man in the woods. The interviews that I've had were, from fairly established community members. Both of them, they were a bit older. One woman was in her 50s, the other man was in his late 30s, which, isn't old, but his social network included a lot of older members in the society. We're talking people in their 60s and 70s because he works a blue collar job, so he's known people who've been around in these parts working blue collar jobs for most of their lives. And the stories that I heard came from, these people's grandparents and great grandparents. So these stories are probably a couple hundred years old. I'm sure a few elements have probably changed over the years, but again, I'll have to do a comparison with other folk tales, see if there's any kind of, you know, continuity between them. They're very interesting in terms of providing a snapshot of the kind of fears and anxieties that were very prevalent during the time. But they've been bothering me, these interviews. These people weren't just telling stories. You know, it wasn't just a campfire tale or a bedtime story. These people, they believed in it. They were still afraid of this man in the woods.